Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, folks. I'm Alexi Robichaux. I'm one of the founders, CEO of BetterUp. We're a people enablement platform that allows companies to increase the satisfaction, loyalty, and performance of their top talent by scaling what's traditionally been thought of as executive coaching to employees at all levels. But we're not going to talk about that today. Today, we're going to talk about something much more important, which is meaning and purpose. So like you, we started to notice in our own personal experience, as well as we were on our LinkedIn feeds and on BuzzFeed and some of the world's best sources of information about all things life and business, the information, that there was this increase in conversation around meaning and purpose in the workplace. So I don't know if anyone's seen this. There was a Wall Street Journal article a few months ago. We wrote a Harvard Business Review article. There's been a ton of research about what is meaning and what is purpose at work. And we got really excited about this. This is my co-founder and I, Eddie, because we started the company really for a couple reasons. But one, we had this profound sense at the time that we had this opportunity at work where, for the first time maybe in human history, work could actually be a platform that helped us flourish and live more fulfilling lives, instead of work being a more exhaustive platform that really took out of us in exchange for money. How could work be a partnership with our employer and a partnership with the company, where it wasn't just an economic exchange, but there was an existential exchange happening too, right? And we weren't just getting money for our work, we were also creating meaning in our lives. And so we started to really search for what is behind meaning and purpose at work. And what we found is that people are literally searching for more meaning and purpose at work. So this is the Google search volume related to meaning and purpose of work. And it's about a 10-year, backwards-looking set of data. And what you see is this precipitous increase in people looking to learn more about how work can be more meaningful and more purposeful. And so we stopped and asked ourselves, what else is happening in this 10-year period that may be contributing to this? And so the first thing we did as former finance people is we went and looked at GDP, right? And we looked at productivity. And we looked together with someone, you may know, Josh Bersin. And what we found from his research and our work, and as we begin to collaborate, is we are in a really weird moment in work history, right? While we are seeing people looking for more meaning and purpose at work, what we also see is a ton of money. We've invested over $1 trillion in that same 10-year period into learning and development in the United States alone, right? And what we're not seeing is any meaningful increases in worker productivity, right? In fact, this is the lowest increase in worker productivity since the 1980s, which is crazy when you think about all the technology we like to hawk in Silicon Valley on the promise that it is going to increase your workers' productivity, right? And so there's one little blip around the iPhone in 2007, you get a little pickup there when you look longitudinally, but essentially after that you start to see diminishing returns. And so on the one hand, we see people are literally using technology to try to find more meaning and purpose in work. On the other hand, we see technology is not driving more productivity in work, but what we do know it's driving is a state of what Josh, I think, very aptly would call digital overwhelm, right? And so while purpose and meaning are being sought out, while productivity is not increasing in the workplace, commensurate with the number of dollars being put in technology that promises increases in productivity, what we do see increasing in the workplace, in no uncertain terms, and you all know this as HR leaders, is we see a lot of pain increasing in the workplace, right? And so we know that anxiety is on the rise, we know depression's on the rise, we know stress is on the rise, we know loneliness is on the rise. We actually did a study last year, which we were fortunate enough to write with Shauna Core, that was the first real workplace look at loneliness and how loneliness spreads as a contagion in the workplace and who are America's loneliest workers. And you can check it out in the Harvard Business Review. But loneliness is, I would say, a new thing we're starting to see in the social sciences and in organizational behavior related to stress and anxiety. Loneliness is really another phenomenon that we're starting to look at and examine to try to understand how this relates to satisfaction and how this relates to human fulfillment. And so this came together for us and really started us to wonder, let's just pause here. What's going on? If we just look at what is the way I think about it, the tectonic plates underneath all this. When I said pain was increasing, we've been doing some conversations with Jeffrey Pfeffer at Stanford. You've probably seen his book, Dying for a Paycheck. If you haven't read it, it's incredible. It is a pretty insightful and I would say near conclusive examination of the cost that some of these things like anxiety, stress, loneliness, take toll, depression in a lot of his research, take toll on the worker, right? And so we started to ask ourselves, what's happening underneath this to drive this really disparity between people looking for meaning, us dumping a ton of money to increase people's productivity, and what we're getting on the other side is a lot of stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And so as we paused, what we found is you could summarize this in the classic Gallup framework as this is just the classic disengagement problem. But it seems like there's some new substrates and nuances to them that aren't accounted for in that framework. And one of those is we are seeing the world change in really unprecedented ways. The way we'll describe it is there is this tectonic shift happening in the world today. And in very broad strokes, what we found through our conversations with customers, from our conversations with our coaches and members, and from researchers at top universities, is we're simply seeing a transition between a Fordist world that is really focused on scalable efficiency to an agile world, which is focused on how do I design as a CEO or as the head of human capital for emergent innovation, right? We're seeing this switch from the best ideas coming at the top and being through a command and control structured, brought down in a scalable and efficient way to the bottom, to how do I now craft an organization where the best ideas come from the bottom and they're brought out to the market by the top, right? And so that transition does one really important thing we found, is it actually raises the stakes on an agile learning culture, right? In that world, having workers engaged, having workers have a sense of fulfillment, having workers feel like they can bring their best contributions to work every day is your only lasting competitive advantage as a corporation, right? The BCG experience curve on you win by producing more units and lowering the unit economics over time is table stakes today, right? The companies who are winning today, the super innovators, are winning because they've designed for emergent innovation where the best ideas come from anywhere in the company and then they make it into the market. A great example of that is AWS. Jeff Bezos did not come up with the idea for AWS. Another great example of that is Flaming Hot Cheetos. A gentleman who used to be the janitor came up with Flaming Hot Cheetos and now runs their new products division at Frito, right? This is a real story, right? And so how do you become an organization where you do that? And if you do that, do you increase the meaning and purpose of your workers? And so we set about to really dive into this detail in a historically unprecedented way and launch the largest study of meaning and purpose in the workplace. It involved over 2,000 participants ranging from all different socioeconomic statuses, ethnic and cultural backgrounds, work types, industries, and sectors, from hourly employees in hospitals who literally change bedpans to corporate executives at some of the largest companies in the world. And what I wanted to share is some of the really, I think, breathtaking findings we were able to glean from the data, and some of the practices we've been able to, with our research teams and people like Josh Burson, really develop in hopes that you can join us in trying to make work more meaningful and more purposeful for all of our people worldwide. So as I mentioned, this is across thousands of data points, but I'm just going to summarize this. Now, before I dive in, we do have this in a very nice, I think it's like 50 to 100-page report if you want to geek out on the data. I always love that, so you can come by our booth, we can get you an electronic copy, and you can dive in. But I want to talk about some of the really high-level stats that I think relate to us today as an audience. So the first thing we did is we looked at our meaningful work scale, and we worked with a couple existing scales. We actually created some of our own statistically valid and reliable scales as well. And we wanted to see across some of the classic OKRs or KPIs that a CHRO is evaluated on, is there a correlation with employees feeling work is more meaningful and these traditional measures of human capital, productivity, and efficiency of spend, right? And so you all know this. I don't have to tell a room full of HR leaders that engagement is a big one. And what we found is for employees who were in the top 20th percentiles, they were 51% more likely to be engaged and report high levels of engagement in their workplace than employees who were in the bottom 20th percentiles of our data set. Right? So immediately you see that it looks like meaning and purpose has a really strong positive correlation with engagement in the workplace, right? The second thing we saw is meaningful work relates really well with employee loyalty and intent to stay, or inversely, negatively with intent to leave, right? And so we saw that folks who were in those top 20th percentiles were almost half as likely to want to leave as folks who were in the bottom 20th percentiles. And we'll double click on this data later because it's really cool. And then third, we wanted as best as we could get to like a dependent variable on performance. And so we looked at received a raise in the last 6 months as an objective validation that you are performing better. And what we found is, again, if you're in those top 20th percentiles of people reporting that work is really meaningful for you versus folks in the bottom 20th percentiles, you were a third more likely to have received a raise in the past 3 months, right? So again, don't have to tell you all in a room full of HR leaders that increasing engagement, increasing employee loyalty, and increasing employee performance are not just good for your people, they're good for the bottom line, right? So we started to dig in more and say, what helps people find meaning and purpose at work? We know when people report that work is more meaningful, there seem to be really strong indications that there's economic upside at both a personal level, you're more likely to get a raise, and also at an organizational level, because organizations hopefully are giving raises to folks who are actually helping to drive bottom line company performance. So this next finding we found is really discouraging. And it essentially says, actually, people on average, they'll only find work to be half as meaningful as it can be, right? And this is important because it means that our partners, our employees, have a vision of how we're letting them down, right? They can use their imagination and say, it's probably like 50% of where I think it should be or could be, right? And so this was really profound to realize that we are like extremely sub-optimized as an economy in terms of the meaningfulness of work. And to answer this question, it means that people have a vision of how meaningful work could be. So we started to ask, if people have a vision of how meaningful work could be, what would they do to get to that place, right? If I'm at 50%, what would I do to fill the tank on a meaningful work and a purposeful job, right? So this finding is crazy. So I just want to frame this up because I had the scientists redo it 3 times. And the scientists, by the way, I don't know, did anyone read the article last year in New York Times about diagnosing depression from Instagram? I don't know if anyone read that. So you can diagnose depression from Instagram. You didn't know that. Depressive people actually do see the world in more blue hues. That's science. That's a real fact. And so you can use computer vision and reverse that to get to a diagnosis. So the scientist who did that was at Harvard. He is now at BetterUp, and he led the study on this related to meaning and purpose in the workplace. So Dr. Andrew Rees and Dr. Gabriella Kellerman, one is a psychologist and computer scientist, one is a psychiatrist, work at BetterUp, and they help lead our labs team who does this research. So I had them run this data 3 times because I couldn't believe what it was saying. But what we found is, if we go back to work is half as meaningful as it can be, we asked people, well, how much would you pay to make it 100% meaningful? And what we found across all the income brackets was that there was like a law of physics here that people would give 25% of their lifetime earnings, this is an annuity stream, their lifetime earnings to have work today be more meaningful. They said, just give me 75% of my paycheck forever. I'd rather be from 50% to 100% of meaningful work. Now, I want to put this in perspective, right? For the average American, that's more than their mortgage payment. That's a month of rent in San Francisco. But for the rest of the country, that's more than their mortgage payment, right? And so I don't want to misconstrue this. We're not saying people value meaningful jobs more than housing. That would be a misinterpretation of the data. But what we are saying is they value meaningful work a lot more than you and I probably thought they did before I started this talk, right? And they can actually quantify how right they are, we won't ever know. But it's how right they think they are that's really concerning as a human capital leader. They know they're willing to give up things for a more meaningful job, right? And it makes sense. You spend more time than ever at work. So you're not asking for a meaningful job when you tell your employer, I want to do something meaningful. You're asking for a meaningful life because for most people, work is their life, right? And so one thing we take away from this is we have to reframe our job as human capital and business leaders. We're not crafting people's careers, we're crafting their life as human beings, right? And there's a huge moral responsibility that comes with that, and there's a huge financial responsibility that comes with that, right? Okay. Now, I mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit more about retention. And so the other thing we found is, okay, so we know that people want meaningful work. We know it's not as meaningful as they want. We know that they will be presumably willing to pay for meaningful work and pay handsomely for meaningful work. What we also found that was somewhat counterintuitive, or I would say maybe not counterintuitive, surprising, was that meaningful work is like this immune system to your culture, though, in terms of toxicity, right? And so we went to places that in our data set had the highest toxic cultures, took the top percentiles of toxic cultures, and then we took the top people of meaningful work in those toxic cultures and found that they were almost 60% more likely to stay than people who weren't, right? And so there's this other almost, I would say, immunizing impact of meaningfulness in the workplace. And think about it, this is the Steve Jobs problem, we call it internally. Like, you will put up with a lot of toxicity if you feel you're building the next iPhone, right? And so there's a lot of companies where, Walt Disney was very similar, right? People put up with a lot because they felt the work they were doing in 1930 at the Walt Disney Company was extremely meaningful, right? Now, we shouldn't take away from this that we can be mean to people. That's not the finding we want to take. What we should take away from this is our people are hanging on to management in hopes of finding meaning, right? And so we started to extract, what does this mean as we look? Can you buy meaning? If people are willing to give up meaning, they're willing to endure toxic cultures, it seems like they will pay. Will money allow you to generate more meaning in the workplace? It's a natural question. And what we found, similar to happiness, is not really. So this we call the Kahneman Curve. You may be familiar with Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel laureate in behavioral economics. And this is the famous curve that shows the more you pay people over the general average, you get a diminishing return of happiness per dollar unit, right? And so people only get happy up to basically their basic needs being met, a little higher. It's like 82,000 in the US today. And what we found with meaningfulness is you see a very similar curve. And so there is a basic level of meaningfulness we need as a human being, but beyond some level of income, paying me more does not make me feel my job is more meaningful. So what makes me actually feel my job is more meaningful was the question. If we can't buy our way out, we have to now actually get creative. And what we found was really breathtaking. It's not career development. In fact, we specifically asked so we could see if there's a difference in people's minds between personal growth as a human being and professional growth as a career, right? And this is maybe the biggest point I can drive home to a group of talent leaders. We started by saying we spent $1 trillion in learning and development in the past decade trying to move productivity. But most of that money mistakes helping people grow as humans first and employees second, with people growing their careers as professionals. And that's not to say people don't want to grow as professionals, but people also want to grow as spouses. They also want to grow as parents. They also want to grow as partners. They want to grow in all domains of their life. People want to flourish. And when they grow as a human being first, they recognize that that is the most meaningful and profound thing you can give them as an employer. I'm going to skip this because I'm running out of time. We're spending $400 billion a year now globally to try to increase productivity, to try to increase satisfaction in the workplace, right? We know 75% of this data, based on our best research, people of this spend disappears within 30 days due to what's called the forgetting curve. Humans forget 90% of what they learn in about 30 days. By 90 days, it's all gone, right? And so most of this money vaporizes. And so as we think about what are the next steps we can do as practitioners, well, one thing we learned from our data is that one of the most important things in increasing meaningfulness in your workplace, and this chart is complex, it looks simple, but I'll have to explain it, it's kind of weird, is the alignment between the employees in management around meaning is more important than the meaning itself. So what this means is you as a leader simply communicating to your employees that you value them having a meaningful life at your job and you are aligned to their pursuit of self-actualization in the workplace is one of the most important and powerful things you can do as an employer to boost the meaningfulness of work for your employees. It means a huge amount to employees to have a leader, a senior leader, a team leader stand up and say, it's important to me that you don't just succeed professionally, it's important to me that you succeed personally at this company. Now, talk in one sense is cheap. That's the starting point. You have to set the tone at the top. But then you have to really start to rethink about your L&D stack and rethink about the investments and ask, am I helping them with skills for this job? Great. We probably are all. But am I also helping them with skills to develop and flourish as a human being? What's really cool is that we know if you want to cascade this through your population, really cool studies have come out in the last 2 to 3 years. You may know this. It takes about 25% of the human population to cascade behavior change. Right? And so you actually don't have to do this for everyone out of the gate. You can pick a strategic beachhead of influencers and employees, ideally around 25% of a given population, and help them foster really profound, purposeful, and meaningful work. And what you will start to see in most human populations is mirroring and mimicking of those behaviors as they become unconscious norms in that population, right? And so tactically, as we leave this presentation, leave this talk, I hope this gives you some data, some context, some background, but hopefully a set of tools and strategies around setting the tone at the top and communicating why meaning is important to you, and then from an investment strategy, really figuring out who's that first 25% that you want to invest in, and make sure that they're going from the tank being half full to the tank being full in meaning and purpose in their lives. Thank you.